And there's a chat box for all of you that this is your first time joining us. There's a chat box there on Zoom. And if you just drop questions in there, Lauren is going to be curating those and she will be responding, kind of sending those to me separately. And so we'll get to those towards the end if we have time for that. And a lot of times the conversation just sort of rolls and we get to answer some of those. But first, just a real quick introduction. So Tobie is a new friend of mine. When I moved to Beaverton 6 months ago, he's one of the first people that said, "You want to meet for lunch?" So we met for lunch, and we know interconnected people and have just lots of different people that are doing life together connected to us. But it was just really great to get to know him and hear some of his story and some of his history. And then when we got into this season, it was just really cool. Just thought, man, it'd be great to have you jump on this group. And so Tobie, just to give you a snapshot, there's a lot of different people. Multiple people that are here with us are church planters, have started churches, they're leading churches. That's a good number of people. There's a lot of different pastors that are on here. And then pretty much anybody else that might be connected to me or somebody else involved with this that saw the advertisement had a chance to jump in. So there's some people, nice. I know that there's a Nike employee on here with us. I won't say who, somebody else that knows both of us that's jumped in on this to be a part of it. And then there's some staff members from B4 that are joining us as well. So some other familiar faces. But you guys, I asked Tobie to do this because he heads up Nike's Innovation Kitchen, which I'm going to let him talk about. But other reason, I want to start with this. The other reason I really wanted him here is you guys were a part of a church plant in Japan, right? When you guys moved there.
Taiwan.
Or in Taiwan. Yeah, when you were in Taiwan. That's right. And you led worship in the church plant while being a Nike employee. Mm-hmm. And I want you guys to know that Tobie's not here as like, some guy that doesn't understand what we do. He's been in the thick of it. His family's dedicated, committed, and they have been participants at deep, deep levels in making church a reality, bringing the gospel forward in different communities. So he has insights into both worlds. So with that, Tobie, would you just first give us a real quick bio, a little quick intro beyond what anybody read? Just a little bit about your family, and then we'll get to some specific questions about your job and what that entails.
Of course, and thank you, Brad, for having me, and Lauren for setting this up, and thank you, Foursquare Multiply. It's great to see everybody's faces there. Yeah, we're social distancing, but still can't stop us, right? The virus can't stop us from doing that, and we're still connecting. And I feel like this is like a digital revival. We always hear revivals, but this is a digital revival, and God is using these very well, you just experienced it, Brad, a little technical difficulty there from someone who probably didn't grow up doing this as much as some of our kids, right?
Right.
And but yet it does seem like it's important, and we're seeing that right now. I'm just like I can't get over how I'm hearing from churches how this is just impacting who they're reaching, and so this is fantastic. And now I'm part of this, and so this is really great for me. So a little bit about me, very, very short, because I really would like to talk to you, as Brad asked me to, regarding innovation and what I do and how it could potentially be used. That philosophy can be used in churches anywhere. But for me, I've been this July. I will be, if God willing, if I can make it to July, I'll be 30 years at Nike. And so it has been my lifelong career. After I was a pole vaulter, that was my sport of choice, and I did it professionally for a couple of years after college, and then I decided to, through injuries and the Lord leading me, I had a family, started a family, and got into coaching. And that's what my dad did. And so my dad, I followed kind of in my dad's footsteps of coaching track and field. And I was coaching at Wichita State, and in the Midwest there, right in the center of everything. And it was great. And I was also actually at that time, I don't think I told you this, Brad, but I'm not sure, but I was actually the regional director for Athletes in Action and there at Wichita. So I led a group there, and was doing that for a little while too, while I was coaching. And then my dad came down with cancer, and God called me back to Portland, various ways, but mainly through Nike. Nike, as maybe most of you know, is a homegrown company here from Oregon, and Bill Bowerman, one of the co-founders, coach, and really the true innovator, and the person that we look up to as innovators here at Nike. He was my brother's track and field coach at U of O, so we knew him personally. And he actually made me my first pair of spikes when I was a senior in high school, which was pretty cool. And I didn't know it then, of course, but he was teaching me innovation at that point when he said, "Hey, Tobie, I want you to go and have your feet X-rayed." And so at first I'm like, I'm not injured, and unless you know something that I don't quite understand it. But like most people, you never said no to Mr. Bowerman or Coach Bowerman. And those piercing blue eyes just said something, and you went and did it. And so he gave me where I went to go get my feet X-rayed. He said, "Come back here in 2 weeks." And so I came back there in 2 weeks, and he put on the table there this track spike, and he said, "This is why I had your feet X-rayed." And at first it just looked like a normal track spike to me. And he goes, no, turn it over. So I turned it over, and it looked like a mess because he had re-drilled all the holes of where the spikes go and put spikes in different places than the traditional way of you putting them in there. And he goes, "This is why I had your feet X-rayed, because I wanted to know where all your bony prominences are in your feet, so that I could place every single spike appropriately for you, just for you." And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And so I used them all through my senior year in high school, and I hadn't talked to Bill Bowerman for a while. And then again, my dad came down with cancer, and there was a person in our church. We were going to a Calvary Chapel church there in Wichita. And when we had already announced that we're going to go to Portland to take on this job, and I knew that we would probably go back to Taiwan, that was part of the deal, that we'd be in Portland for a couple of years and then go to Taiwan for Nike. This woman came up, and she said, "I have a prophecy for you." And or something, I don't know if she used the word prophecy, but she says, "I have a word from you for you from the Lord." And I go, "Whoa, okay." So I listened to it, and she says, "Tobie, this is what God wants you to do. He wants you to go and be with Nike, and then when you go overseas," and she didn't know we were going to go to Taiwan, but when you go overseas, and I hadn't even told her that we were going to go overseas, "you're going to be going over there as a missionary." I go, "Well, wait a minute. No, I'm not. If I go over there, I'm going to be going over there as an employee of Nike." And she goes, "No, you don't understand, Tobie. No, you have a mission, and Nike's going to pay for it. You're going over there, and instead of a true missionary where they have to go on furloughs to raise more monies to go back over you don't have to do that. And so what you are going to be, Tobie, is you're going to be a tent maker." And I said, "I don't understand." And so then she explained to me about Paul being a tent maker, and Priscilla and Aquila, and all of the things that Paul was doing as a missionary, where he didn't have to raise funds. He still funded himself. And so it started to make a lot of sense until I went to Portland. And then my dad had cancer, and I didn't want to go because of that. And my dad told me that he says he would be very, very upset with me if I didn't take that part of the job. And so my dad kicked me out of the state of Oregon and back and over to Taiwan, where my wife is from. And then when I got there, 2 weeks after I got there, we were going to the local Taichung community church there in Taiwan. And the pastor there invited me to have dinner like a week after we were there. And so I said, okay. And then when we had dinner, he said, so Tobie, I understand you play a little guitar. I go, yeah, very little. And so I said, or then he said, well, I don't know if you noticed, but we really need a lot of help with our with worship every Sunday. And I'm just going to say it. And we didn't have, like, there was hardly any small talk. He just says, I think you're supposed to lead worship for us. And I'm like, no, I'm not. and like, I literally said, no, that's not me. Cause I literally just started playing guitar. I literally just starting to learn the songs. I'm not ready to be in front of anybody.
You were being confronted with the desperation of church planters right there.
Evidently. But they were meeting at the Morrison School Academy in their auditorium, and they didn't have a sound system. They had one piano player. And they were singing, of course, just basically out of hymnals. And he just says, I really think, and this is, again, we've been there for 3 weeks, 1 week after I had been to church the first time, and I'm already being asked to worship or to lead worship. And I go, wait a minute, my wife actually is an actual professional singer. Why aren't you asking her? She goes, nope, it's you, Tobie. It's you. And so I said, well, I got to pray about it. So I went back and prayed about it and talked to Pearl, my wife. And there was nothing that was leading me to say no. It was just, everything was going forward. And then he says, we also need a sound system, and you need to help us build a sound system. Like, get the right, like, go find the right models and actually, we'll buy it, but we just don't know what to buy. So I went back and I said yes, and here I am now leading worship, being in the country now for 3 weeks. Never been in front of anybody singing. My wife is a professional singer, and she's the one listening, and she's out in the audience, and it was just me and the piano player. And then all of a sudden I found out that one of my teammates there at Nike is a Christian, and he's an exceptional guitar player. And so, of course, I went to him and asked him, and then I found out there's another Christian in my office, and he's a very good keyboard player. Even though we had a piano player, I thought we could introduce keyboards as well. And so we introduced keyboards, and in about 3 months, we had a worship team, and we were doing a bit more than just hymns now. We were back in those days, of course, it was like Maranatha type music and things like that. But it was just God just leading every single the way. And then at that point, when I was leading worship, it dawned on me again about the woman in Wichita who said that I was going to be going over as a tent maker. And now here I am, I'm making tents or helping, feed the flock and bring more into the flock. And Nike was paying for it.
That's so cool.
So that's where, and then, fast way forward to today and moved us back. And so now he's having me, God is having me do a lot on campus. We have a Nike Bible fellowship that meets every Friday morning. We'll meet on Zoom tomorrow morning again. And there's a lot, I'm just happy to say, a lot of young people that are coming to it. It's just, there's actually just a few of us old codgers there, and a lot of 20 somethings that are there. And they're just hungry. They're hungry, and they want to know how they can be tent makers too. And now I can give them that experience. Because I lived it, and I'm still living it. But and I'm talking to a lot of other people in other industries that are in secular companies, and sometimes even in the entertainment business. in other professional athletes who are Christians, and I'm telling them about, hey, you know what? You're a tent maker too. And so this tent making has been something that I've been really kind of, I guess that's my identity now,
Yeah.
as a Christian in a secular company. And but I'm
I love
still led and still need to. Uh-oh, are you there?
Yep,
Okay.
we're here.
I still need to innovate, and I still need to ask the right questions on how to innovate in my job, and to make sure that we're moving the company forward in ways that we didn't previously.
So let's dive into that conversation for a minute. So tell us just maybe a 60-second thumbnail sketch of what is the Innovation Kitchen.
Yeah. The Innovation Kitchen was actually formed almost 20 years ago in 2000, right after I came back from the Sydney Olympics. And a bunch of us were, about 10 to 12 of us were placed literally in a room apart from where we were in our inline status. And inline means we were in a category. I was in running, somebody was coming from basketball and soccer, and they took a bunch of us from different categories and put us in a room and literally said, now go innovate. And what was unusual about that was that when you come from an inline status and category, you're given briefs. This is what you're going to make, or this is what we want you to do, and this is the price it's going to be, this is how much it's going to weigh, all the kinds of things. And so you have to kind of build on what the brief is. Here, we were put in a room and there was no brief. In fact, it was on purpose, because true innovation doesn't come from a brief. It comes from basically deep inside. It comes from curiosity. It comes from experimentation. It comes from a lot of different ways, but it usually does not come from a brief. And so because you don't know what innovation is until you have it. And so no one can describe to me what my next shoe is going to be, because it hasn't been thought of yet. It isn't created yet. And so they put us in this room, and for the first 3 months, we didn't have anything to do other than kind of just think about things. But one of the first things that I know I needed to do was I needed to go talk to our experts in the field, meaning our athletes, our coaches, our trainers, those who the people we are going to design for. And I wanted to see from them what's working, what's not working. I wanted to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I heard a lot of ugly. and that was directed back towards us as Nike. But it was really, really, you kind of had to have thick skin really quick. But once you kind of got over the initial shock of some of the things that were slapped in your face, it was really exhilarating, because, I see that now, and we can do something about that. I don't know how yet, but that's great to know. And so we built up a lot of, I guess you can say, problems. We just needed, obviously, to have the solutions for them. And so the Innovation Kitchen, we liken ourselves to chefs. And so when you're creating, if a real chef is creating a new cuisine, they have a pot here, and they have ingredients that are up here and here, and they're trying some things. They're putting some of this ingredient there, some of that ingredient there, and stir it around, and they taste test it. Doesn't taste so good. Sometimes you throw it out, start over, or maybe you put in new ingredients to improve the taste. And eventually you come up with, hopefully, even a new food item or a new cuisine. And that's what we do. We just do it for shoes and apparel. And that's essentially what the Innovation Kitchen is.
Yeah, I love that part of it. It's interesting. And one of the things I've been saying for the last week or so, and I said it to you, is, on a basic level, a shoe is a shoe is a shoe. It's put it on your foot, you walk in it. And yet you guys innovate year after year. And I find myself oftentimes, and I think a lot of us, the reason we're on this call is, I think we live in a time when it's sort of like the church has been the church.
Yeah.
And we don't often translate some of those principles of innovation to the church and think, we have the same ingredients year after year. We keep doing the same thing over and over. And And so just that idea of bringing that to bear, a couple of things that you mentioned there that I want to revisit just real quickly. You said, you talked about going and getting feedback. How much of your innovation is driven by negative feedback versus positive, like vision for what's next? What's the balance there for you guys?
I would say for the most part, we're actually fixing things. So there's a problem. So if you want to say that's a negative, now how negative, there might be different levels, like this is just terrible. I don't know why you're doing this, to if you could just do this, and if you could do that, this would make this so much better. So there are definitely different levels of that. And I would say we're less on the it's terrible versus this would be better if we could do that. And so I think it's more on that side of things.
Yeah, you would say innovation is coming out of a place of saying, hey, this is fine, but we could do better. And we're just always looking for ways to make this thing more effective, make it better.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example. So real quick, when we went, this was early on in the Innovation Kitchen days, and probably about 2001, 2002, and went to one of our coaches down in Stanford, one of our Nike coaches, and literally had no agenda going in there, just same question we were asking everybody: what's working, what's not, what's good, bad, and the ugly. And he went right to the ugly, actually. Or he just said, hey, we just got a shipment of your latest Air Max shoes, and like 300 pairs of them. It's a Nike school. They get free equipment, free shoes. And I just sent those back. And of course, the next question was, well, why? What was wrong with them? He said, I think it's giving our kids, actually, it's hurting them. We're getting a higher incidence of Achilles tendonitis. He specifically said Achilles tendonitis. And then my next question is, well, do you think you know something about the shoe that might be causing that? And he goes, I think it's just too much shoe. And it's less, you guys have lost your way. And here's a Nike coach at a Nike school getting free stuff, and he's bashing on us pretty good. And again, that's why you have to have that thick skin, to like take it, but there's goodness that can come out of this. And I knew it. As soon as he said it, I was like, all right, we got to dig in. What is it? What is it? Why did you send those? Why do you think it's Achilles tendonitis? He goes, well, I'm not a doctor and all this kind of stuff. I just know. And so we dug into a little bit. We brought in his doctor, actually. And so we got some more expertise in there on his side to find out. And they basically were saying, yeah, the shoe is doing too much for the athlete. Don't forget, the body is supposed to move in certain ways. And this is beautiful, by the way, Brad. This is beautiful because essentially, you know what they were saying without saying it? They were saying creation at Stanford University.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, like, you guys are going against what was created to move in this manner. And so it's fighting against it. And so it just dawned on me that it's like, oh yeah, it's just too much shoe. And so I said, well, what's your remedy right now? I said, well, we're taking your shoes off and we're running barefoot. And so no shoes. And whoa, that's tough. I mean, we're a footwear company. That's not good to hear that, right? We're a growth company. We got to make money. We got to sell shoes. And you're taking our shoes off and going barefoot. But again, thick skin. And so then the next thing was like, well, what if you could have best of both worlds? What if you had a shoe that then in the foot in the shoe performed like it was barefoot, but it was protected at the same time? Would you enjoy that, Coach Lanana? And he goes, oh my gosh, if you could have that, like a shoe that protects you, because he goes, I do worry when the kids go out on their own and try to do stuff barefoot, they might step on glass, they might step on a hole, they might stub their toe, whatever it may be, because the shoes do actually protect you from all that stuff. So that's a good thing. But the other stuff is not working very well. I said, well, let's keep what's working, the protective side, but let's give the natural side a chance to work as well while it's being protected at the same time. And he goes, well, if you can do that, then that's going to, and we came back, and that's when we started working on is called still today Nike Free. And it also turned into one of our biggest businesses. It's a $1.3 billion business, Nike Free, just by itself, which is bigger than most of our company's whole company. And so it was the aha of combining what you're hearing on the problem, a little bit of maybe what they're doing on their side of the solution, and not throwing every single thing away that we're doing, but improving the things that we could improve while giving them protection at the same time. And it was a home run.
I love it. I love it. At some point, we might ask the question about when you first started doing that, because that was met with some resistance initially.
Oh, yeah, that may be a whole nother Zoom meeting call.
Yeah, exactly. But as we talk about that, there are certain questions that you guys must ask over and over. And I think, I love this. I think this sort of frames the conversation for us, because I think a lot of times we get feedback. It's called email complaints. We also get feedback in people stop coming. We have our own, in the church world, we have our own systems for feedback. Inconsistent attendance, people are irregular, disinterested, not engaging in things, and so I think we have lots of feedback loops. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is innovation is part just like getting feedback. What's the feedback telling you? And then it sounds like you guys throw questions at that. You mentioned a couple things earlier. You said obviously there was a curiosity aspect of this.
Yes.
There's an experimental aspect of this. What are some of the questions that you guys throw at stuff to try to come up with solutions?
Yeah, well, I'll give you, I'm going to start with the example this time. So and it goes with the curiosity, and it goes to asking what if questions all the time asking what if questions. For Nike, the biggest what if question that was ever asked at the very, very beginning was when Bill Bowerman was in his kitchen, and it was a morning where breakfast was starting to be cooked, and his wife opens up the waffle iron. And his curiosity got the best of him there, because he didn't see egg, water, and flour going in that waffle iron. He saw the geometry. He saw the texture. He saw everything that was in the mold shape of that waffle iron. And he envisioned liquid rubber going in there, because he immediately thought, whoa, that's a texture that maybe could work on an outsole. So what if I go get some rubber, liquefy it, pour it in there? What if I bake it like a waffle? And what if I take it out? And what if I put it on the bottom of one of my shoes? And what if I give it to one of my athletes? And what if they love it and they think, oh, it's an amazing traction device, and maybe even a little bit more cushioning because of the pistoning that those waffle shapes are doing and all that kind of stuff. What if I could make an outsole from a waffle iron? And of course he did. And we have the waffle sole even today. And so driving what if questions that will drive another what if question, that will drive another what if question, will drive another what if question, does amazing for innovative work.
So that's question number one, that is what if. So I mean, obviously we get feedback.
Yeah.
And we have to be thick-skinned, and we have to take it, listen to it. And then there's this what if process of, okay, now let's just dream and just keep asking what if. Do you guys ever, this is a great question. Have you done anything that was just, you asked so many what if questions that you landed in some place that was like outer space, and you just went, yeah, that was a huge mistake? How often does that happen?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was Albert Einstein, said that if what you're creating is not insane, then it's probably not, you're not probably going far enough. Because innovation operates on the edges. It always has, and it always will. True innovation, and I really want to preface it and qualify it as, because you hear the word innovation all the time, but I like to say true innovation, because there's there's levels of innovation, but when you talk about really making changes that I think it's even said, if it's not going to make a difference, it's not innovation, it's iteration.
Mm.
If it's not going to make a difference, it's not innovation, it's iteration. Well, we have a whole nother group that does iterations, that does color ups, that does, maybe a change in the pattern, but very little change, and maybe new prints and what have you. Those are iterations of basically the same thing. And they can make a difference as far as like, yeah, they can sell a lot of shoes, but is it truly making a difference for the athlete? Because if we're doing things for the athlete to make a difference for them to reach their full potential, a new color is not going to do that.
Right.
But new innovation will. So you really have to get at the heart of what's truly going to make a difference. And you can't really make a difference unless you're operating on those edges, because you have to go further, you have to go far enough out to see what that is. That doesn't mean that you're going to stay there, because it's kind of like negotiating practices. You know, when you're trying to buy a house or a car, the house owner says this and you offer this, and then usually you meet somewhere in the middle, usually. And so it's that up. So innovation can do that too. You operate on the edges, and then you come back in somewhere, because ultimately we do have to, especially for Nike, we have to make a lot of these. It has to be able to be mass produced. If you stay on the edges, it's very difficult to mass produce some of those things. Like some of our 3D printing techniques that we want to do right now.
Yeah.
We love them, and they're on the edges and they're amazing, but maybe we can only make 100 of them in a month. That's not going to do anything for us in the business side. So, but we operate there to understand what we can do, but then to make a lot of them, we come back a few levels below that. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. You know, it's interesting. When you say those things, there's a couple of different things. I think one is just the idea that Nike created a space to get to the edges. And I think so many times in the church, we just sort of look at everything and go, well, it's either all or nothing. It's hard to get to the edge. It's hard to find the edge. It's hard to feel comfortable doing it. You know, I know for years I've used the language, we're going to pilot something. That's actually how I say everything that we're going to start, because that way, if we end it, people's feelings aren't hurt. But, we're going to pilot this, we're going to try it. And we just remind people of it. So trying to create that space with language. But man, when you were just talking just now, Tobie, I realized that a lot of times what we consider innovation in the church is actually just iteration. We're changing colors. We're slapping a new look on this or that, but we're not actually innovating. That's what's really fascinating about this season. I think we have so many of us right now are really thinking about innovation. We've been forced into this season where it's like, no, we have a job to do, but we don't even have any of the forms of delivery. We can't just make another iteration. In fact, I think a lot of us, I know myself, we kind of started to just do an online iteration of what we do in person and realize, oh, you can't even really do that. You got to be really more creative than that even, and start innovating. That's just amazing stuff. So you got the question of what if that drives. You've got this innovation happening at the edges, innovation versus iteration. I think those are really important concepts in this. One of the things you said a moment ago when you're talking about Stanford, you talked about bringing in experts. How often do you guys reach outside of the innovation kitchen and pull in experts from other fields?
I would say we do it probably less than half of the time. And the reason it's not more is because even when we're innovating, sometimes it's even beyond some of the experts, just because they operate where they're good at, and we're actually trying to go above them. So if we're operating on the edges, it's hard. But when we do come back in from the edges, the experts are very, very helpful when we start to come back in. So that's when, like for instance, when we started the Nike Free thing, and we were operating on the edges for a little bit, and when we started to come back in to get a little bit closer to the consumer, then we brought in our sports research scientists and our physiologists, and I started to go talk to some podiatrists and a few experts, in this field. And of course, some of the podiatrists who, doctors and they were, some of them are very like, they're like right in the middle and they don't like to go. And this is what I've been taught. But I still needed to hear that because I wanted to kind of like rebalance myself because I've been on the edges for so long. And then if I hear what's in here, which is not far enough to make a difference, then I know I can kind of like see where I'm at. It's a good measurement to see where I'm at and where I need to go. I don't want to go all the way back to here. I can't be in this, this far on the edge, but I need to be in this zone right here. So it's really good to hear some of those experts that pull you almost too far back. And then, you have a good measurement on where that's at. And so I would say that's why we don't do it all the time. I would say maybe 40% of the time.
Yeah, I really like that, Tobie. I think it's good because I think you're a passionate person and there's an artistic side to who you are. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us are in that same place where we're passionate, we're artistic. Yeah. A lot of times when you push innovation, you get so sold on your thing that when you go to get that person to pull you back, it's almost like, well, don't try to stop me now. And I think it's helpful that you guys actually see that as, no, we're on the edges on purpose because at some place we're going to land back in the middle and this is going to be really good. We can deliver this at that level.
Yeah.
I know this story because we've talked about it and it's actually one of my favorite stories. And so I'm going to ask a couple of real specific questions around it. If you're comfortable telling it, you can just tell me no, but when you first started going down the Nike free road, that got some significant resistance from supervisors, from people around you. The word was basically, you said it earlier, Tobie, why would we do this? We're a footwear company. So you got some resistance up front. How many times did you pitch the Nike free before it went through?
I don't know the exact number before it actually was okay to go forward for commercialization, but I do know that it was several months. It wasn't a full year, but it was several months, probably closer to 8 months, somewhere around 8 months, that I was pitching it internally to Nike execs because ultimately we have to get this blessed. We have to get it to where everybody the juggernaut of our internal Nike kind of machine that gets it to commercialization and ultimately to our customers has to get involved, and so they have to go along with that, of course. So, but I was struggling because some of the execs were, again, like you just said, were questioning why do we want a shoe that's like barefoot? Then maybe people are just going to go barefoot and then we're out of business. They went immediately to there, and I'm like, no, they're not going to. Trust me. There's a American Barefoot Society that has like 300 members, and they've had 300 members for like 20 years. So it hasn't grown much. I don't think that's going to happen. But what was happening was we had all the content. We had actually all the data. We had already got our experts, our sports scientists in there, and we even had it in a third-party review, and it was blessed there as actually being significantly improving the strength and the flexibility of one's foot when you use the shoe properly. And I had all of that information, and it still wasn't getting through. And it was bugging me. And one exec who was basically the final authority, who was running production at the time, he's not there now, but he was running production at the time, one of our vice presidents said, Tobie, I've heard this over and over, and I just don't know if it's gonna, I go, well, just give me one more. And he goes, all right, you have one more presentation. And when I said that, after I left him, I just was thinking, I want one more, but I don't have any more new information to give him. I just knew I needed one more chance. And so,
okay, can we pause right here? Because before we go to this, because this is so good, especially for those of us that are leading change and innovating. So just a couple of real quick points. I mean, so you're getting resistance, and the resistance is basically, you're going to kill our business, which Man, you talk about change in the church. I think that's part of the tension that we feel all the time. Wait a second. If you do that, you're going to break the church. And I've actually heard, I had a church planter one time ask me, she said to me, am I going to break my church? And I love that the tension isn't around like, hey, we don't like the product. It's like, no, we see long-term effects. So I think that's really applicable for us. And then the second thing you said right there before we get to this is you didn't have any more new information. And I love this next part of your story because it wasn't information. So you had 30 minutes. You're going to go sit in front of the vice presidents and you got to make this thing. It's your last pitch to make the Nike free. Like, I mean, most of us probably have this in our closet. It wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for this last 30-minute pitch. So you didn't have new information. What'd you do?
So the only thing that I thought I could do, and that I said I had to change my presentation. I had to change how I presented it to the execs with the same content, with the same information, because I had no new information. They had heard it all. And we had all of the science, we had the design, the design was final. We just needed to get it commercialized. And this is what, and so I had one more pitch. And so the only thing that I could think of was I needed to change how I presented it, how it came from me to them. And so I guess you could say I was looking at myself, like maybe the problem is me more so than the content, because the content was solid. It was good. It was good information. It's a great design. And so I said, we've innovated the product. I need to innovate my presentation. And so I thought about it and I said, I need to make this very simple, but very, very powerful. So I took, and I'm just going to use this as an example. I decided that I needed to take in what we had already been using for a lot, but I needed to integrate it into my presentation, and that was the model of a foot. So I used my other glasses here as the foot. And I decided what I was going to do was to chain this foot up. I needed to take a chain, and so we bought this chain link, and we chained it from this is the toe and this is the heel and the ankle. We chained it, starting with the toe, and chained it all the way up to the ankle to here. And so I went into the presentation, and with the same exact information that they've heard me say over and over and over for almost 8 months. The only difference was every single time I said that content, like in a sentence or some sort of information that I could stop at, I would unwind it one time. And then I would say something else and I'd unwind it again. And then I would say it again and I'd unwind it. And it only literally took me 5 minutes to say all the information that they've been hearing for 8 months. And at the last one, when I took it off and the chain just fell off of the rest of the chain and into my hand, and then I held up the foot and I said, and that's why we call it Nike Free.
Love it.
And there was the dramatic pause.
Yeah.
And so I had forgotten that we said this name, the name of the shoe, for a reason. It wasn't just a fancy, just out of the blue name, Nike Free. The name Free meant something. We were freeing up the foot from our own designs, from the very thing that the coach told me the very first day that I heard this, that your shoes, you guys have lost your way. Your shoes are doing too much. We need the foot to do more. That's how it gets stronger. That's how it gets more flexible. But you guys are containing it too much. So when we worked very hard on finding that name and making sure we could trademark that name. And I hadn't been saying much about that name this whole time, this 8 months. And so I needed to visually show them and to end it with the name. And that's why we call it Nike Free. And I looked into their faces and I'm like, this is either going to go nowhere and it's done, or I did. And I looked, and without them seeing that same vice president that had said, you have one more chance, Tobie, I could see it in his eyes. I could see that he got it this time. And my initial thought was, Brad, I was mad. Like,
Really?
dang it. This is the same content I've been telling you for 8 months, and now you get it? But at the same time, I was also mad at myself because I hadn't given them the very essence of why we were even doing this shoe in the very first place, was to free up the foot.
That's so good. You know, I just think about all the changes we ever want to bring in the church, or the things we want to try. And I just think about resistance, and the resistance. I mean, so many times the mistake that I've made is I look back and I realize I didn't tell people why we were doing it. You know, I got so bent on the actual product, or I got so focused on the how we were going to do it, that I didn't explain the heart of this. And I mean, we didn't somehow forgot to say we're freeing the foot in this whole process, you know?
Yeah. And an innovator, a serial innovator, and I mean that in a good way, a serial innovator who does this all the time, also has to be a serial storyteller. You have to be a good storyteller. And I was missing that part of me being an innovator. And so that was something that now that I know many, many years later, over these years, that I've had to really hone in on the storytelling of anything that I'm working on, is as important as the thing that I'm working on.
Right.
So I tell my young designers and innovators that they have to work on their craft of storytelling as much as the craft of the product itself.
Yeah, man, that's so good. I love that you're saying that, because I think a lot of great ideas have died because we couldn't tell the story, or even churches have died because we couldn't innovate. You know, those kinds of things. Yeah.
And you know what our products do? You know who tells our products and the story of the products more than anybody, and especially if it's a signature shoe, is of course our athlete, right?
Right.
Athlete that's on, and so they can tell the story for us. So sometimes we get like, oh, if I could just get the product and I get it to the athlete, and then they got it, but that doesn't. We don't always have that luxury. In this case, Nike Free was not, there was no athlete muse for it. And so the muse was the foot. I had to free the foot, and they had to see that in their own mind.
That's so good. You know, for years I've said, you know, it's hard to always measure a win in the world of the church. And for years I've said that the best way for us to measure a win is the stories of life change. You know, it's the athlete who's impacted. It's the person in the neighborhood who goes, my life is different today because of this. Yeah. I just love that, you know, that connection of saying, okay, that at the end of the day, they're going to sell this as much as the innovation is. It's them believing in what we're doing and knowing that it's a good thing.
Yes.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got like 10 minutes, and I got a really good question. I think this is actually really relevant for us. Somebody asked about history and innovation. And it's interesting because when they asked that question, it popped up. I actually thought right now I've got one of my pair of shoes at home, which you guys can maybe imagine that my office is about a block from Nike, and my brother-in-law who's on this call works there. And so I might own a few pairs of Nikes, but I got a pair recently, and it has Coach Bowerman's face on it, down on the insole. And there's, you know, I constantly see this sort of the tip the hat to the past.
Yeah.
How in the world do you balance? I think this is so relevant for us. How do you balance innovation with also a respect for the past? Is there language? Are there principles? What have you guys done to do that? Because somehow you've preserved that. Yeah,
I mean, well, we certainly don't want to forget the past. That's the first thing, because we do learn from it. And every single product that we do, especially an innovative product that first comes out. And again, I'm not talking the iterative ones, the innovative ones. They're not perfect. Just like us as humans, we're not perfect. And I will never say that I've designed a perfect shoe. Never will. And I don't think any designer could say that.
Well, my first Nike Frees, they fell apart. I was running across the Brooklyn Bridge, and I'm not joking. They're my first pair, and they disintegrated. But I took them back, and they replaced them for free. So
yeah, see,
I'm not bitter.
And so it's not perfect, but there's some goodness. I have, and I can't remember if I told you this, Brad, but I have this thing in my office, and I just call it my rack of shame. You know, you hear of Hall of Fame. This is my rack of shame, and and I call it rack of shame. It's a reflection, and I'm making fun of myself, what have you, and it's all the things that I've done that haven't made it. And a lot of them have been there on this rack of shame for 20 years. So for me, that's history. That's something. But here's the thing. Somebody comes walking by, they see something on that rack of shame. They may have been at Nike for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. They weren't there 20 years when I did this one thing that they're like, hey, Tobie, what's that? What's that about? And I go, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it didn't go anywhere. He goes, yeah, but that thing, that component on it, what's that component? And I start talking to him about this component or the material or whatever it is that attracts them to it. And before I know it, they're using it in their product now, 20 years later.
Yeah.
So that happens all the time. So even though 100% of it didn't work, there's certain aspects of it that actually did work. It just, as a whole, it didn't work. But somebody else comes along, another serial innovator, and they take a look at it, and they can actually use it for themselves. So that's why we like, as innovators, we like to be in the open. We like to have a studio kind of area, and we can see what everybody's doing, and they can see my rack of shame. They can see things that I did that, as a whole, you probably shouldn't do again. But in parts, actually, you could take it over here, and that would be part of some of those parts is back, putting it up on the shelf with those ingredients, putting it back into your pot and creating your next.
Yeah, man, so good. I love this because, you know, I guess what I'm hearing, maybe you can confirm or deny this, but it sounds like, I mean, I just think a lot of times we think of innovation and we almost create this enemy of the old in order to innovate. Like, oh, the old is bad. But it sounds to me like the spirit of the innovation kitchen, you're not condemning the past to create something new. And there's this ability to say, no, we can move into the future and we don't have to condemn the past. And oh, by the way, even some bad ideas in the past might come back full circle. And so I think there's something beautiful about that it's not, you can innovate without having to condemn what you did previously.
Absolutely. I couldn't really say it any better than that. I think you can't condemn the past. I think there are parts of the past that you can even pull up and reuse again. Maybe not the whole thing, but probably parts of it. And that's okay. That's reinventing things can also be very innovative.
It's so interesting. When I planted my first church, this is back in the early 2000s, I planted that church, and it was a reaction to the past for me. And so we're doing all these things, we're innovating, and then I remember showing up on a Sunday, and I don't think anybody is on the call other than my daughter that was there. But I remember showing up on a Sunday, and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like what I've created. And then I had this moment of realizing there were things from my past that I was longing for and missing. There were elements of my experience, and I started kind of diving back into those things and appreciating them and saying, okay, instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, what was really at the heart of that? Why did I love it? And I had to kind of come to a reckoning. In order for me to really innovate, I actually had to go backwards before I could go forwards.
Yeah.
And figure some things out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, and I know we'll probably get to a couple more questions, but there's two real important philosophies of innovation that are very, very important and maybe even seem, somewhat obvious, but it's really important that we all hear this. I do. I believe it. And this is actually learned from past in the history. In fact, way past. From a guy that I believe is the most innovative person that maybe God's ever created. I don't know. But Leonardo da Vinci. I think everybody knows who that is. Obviously, that's history. That's way past here. But think of it. I mean, the guy was, a doctor, a real doctor. He was an inventor. He was an artist, a sculpturist, painter. I mean, he did it all. He literally did it all. And so you have to kind of like, when you see that, when you see the success, even if it's in the past, let's learn from it. I mean, we still learn from the Old Testament, right?
Right.
And the New Testament. They're both in fast for us. But we still learn from that. And so there's two philosophical things that really drove Leonardo da Vinci. And the first one is called sfumato. Sfumato is Italian for being like going up in smoke. And what that truly means is a true innovator has to have a bit of a mad scientist side to them. Not being afraid to take that pot and take some of those ingredients and putting them in there and trying them. And trying ingredients that have never been placed together before, by the way. And knowing that sometimes it actually might blow up in your face. There might be smoke that just comes up, and that's going up in smoke. That's sfumato. So when new designers and developers come in, I have to tell them, you cannot be afraid to be having a lot of sfumato today. You got to have sfumato. Where's your sfumato? You got to be a mad scientist. Now, the flip side of that is arte scienze, art and science. Italian, arte scienze, art and science. That's the whole brain thinking. So Leonardo was also very logical as well. He had the mad scientist side. I mean, in his drawings, he draws the helicopter. I mean, for goodness sakes, he has a helicopter. People thought he was literally insane. And today we have the helicopter. He wasn't insane. He was just being very, very innovative. And so, but you have to have the logic side of it as well. And so the whole brain thinking goes with the sfumato. So here's the analogy. Back to the chef analogy. It would not be very logical for any chef to take a pot and cover their eyes and then just blindly take the ingredients from anywhere up on both of these shelves and put them in there, then stir it around and then taste test it. Now that would be illogical and not good innovator, because now you're taking risks that you didn't really think about very well at all. And I think we have to be cautious of that. But when you're looking at the ingredients and you're saying, I have a good feeling about this, and I have a good feeling about that, and I have a good feeling about those two coming together down into here, stirring them around, I have a really good feeling. Now, it still may not work, but you had a good shot at that was gonna work. And that, my friends, is called a calculated risk. And so calculated risks is where we operate as innovators, true innovators, every day.
So good. So good. There's so much to apply here. We're running really short on time. So one of the things we're going to do, because I know you got places to go and you got people to see on Zoom, places to go on Zoom and people to see on Zoom. We'll probably do a little summary for you guys. We're going to post this conversation and also maybe it's just some of the highlights of this from the conversation on the Foursquare Multiply website. Man, Tobie, thank you so much for just taking time with us. It's so helpful. I know just getting us thinking outside the box. I think you guys can all tell Tobie's an outside the box thinker, but then you also land in the real world. In fact, one final really quick thing, the story you told me about a week ago about we were at the wedding, you told me about walking in the innovation kitchen and there were people in there innovating something you guys don't normally innovate. Is that safe to tell?
Oh yeah. It's public knowledge. Yeah.
Okay. So Tobie was telling me this the other day. You walked in the office during COVID. You had to go get some things at your office. So you showed up on campus. You go in the building. There's people working, and they were working on what?
They were cutting out. We have our airbag film that we make our airbags out of, and there was some airbag film, and people were just like cutting shapes out of them. And I'm saying, what's going on here? And then my boss was there, and he didn't answer me right away. He just looked in my eyes. I looked in his, and I just knew immediately he was like through his eyes saying, we need your help. And so, so I went over there and I took a look, and they were basically cutting out lenses for these face shields that the medical care workers were using on the front lines to protect themselves from somebody coughing and spitting up and basically potentially spreading the virus. And during those days, this was March, I believe it was like March 16th, 17th, somewhere around there. So really, really at the height of like just craziness.
Yeah, everything was shutting down, right?
Everything was shutting down. This was like, I had come back, we had just were told to go back to home. And yet they said we could come back to go get some things. So I was going back to get some things. And then I stayed there when I went back to get some things. I stayed there for the next 5 hours. And then for the next 2 weeks, I was doing anything but working from home.
Yeah.
I was working actually back at the office, and we didn't know anything. We were working definitely closer than 6 feet together. We were definitely not having any kind of protection on ourselves, but we were making the things that we were going to hopefully get to the amazing medical workers. And ultimately, we made the face shield. We prototyped about 20 to 30 different options and got those to about 10 of those went to OHSU, and then they literally wear tested them that evening. And the next day they came back, yep, we like this one. And then it was a matter of, okay, how do we make more of these? We need to come up with our own assembly line. And so we had to innovate on the assembly line as well. And there was like vice presidents in there and senior directors, and we were all on the assembly line to figure out. And my job was to put the foam on the lens, and it was really fun because these days I don't get my hands as dirty, literally, as far as making things as much as I used to. This was super fun. It was like back in those days, and it doesn't matter if it was shoe or it was a face shield. Innovation is innovation. It's innovation. And you said a shoe is a shoe and a church is a church. It goes the same though for innovation. True innovation is true innovation is true innovation. And when you operate in that realm, you're gonna see some great things. You're gonna see some things that don't work as well, and you have to accept that. That should be okay. And I really appreciate you, Brad, for bringing everybody together, because it first starts with somebody saying it's okay to innovate. It's okay to make mistakes, because that's how we learn, and then you move on. And so it's really important that you have leaders to allow you to innovate and to try some things and put them in a pot. And sometimes it'll blow up in your face, and then you throw it out and you start again and you go again.
I love it. What a cool thing, man. I absolutely just love that story. I love that you walked in the office and you guys were in the middle of prototyping. You guys got it figured out. You guys have made a bunch of them now, right?
Yeah, actually I got the last, where's my numbers? Oh, here they are. Yeah, the face shield. So we're making two different things. We're making a full face shield. We're shipped about 150,000 of those. And we're up to about 130,000 of these Papper lenses, which is a lens that goes into kind of like a helmet where it's blowing air, and the lens can come off and on. I mean, you can, when it's dirty, you basically just throw it away. So it's a removable lens. So we don't make the helmet, just the lens. And then we do make the full face shield. So we're basically over, if you combine both of those, yeah, it's pretty much right close to 300,000.
That's crazy. So I just love that. And that was just a few weeks ago. And it's such a cool thing, such a great story of innovation. And really, I love that was the heart of that team, saying, hey, there's another thing we can be doing. We don't have to make shoes. We can actually solve this crisis, and they can jump in. And I think that's the other part for us as church leaders, to be able to pivot in those moments and see an opportunity to innovate and maybe do something that we don't normally do, but the opportunity to really serve the world well and serve the community well. It's such an amazing, amazing thing. My friend, thank you so much. Is there one book that you would recommend to us on the topic of innovation?
Oh, by far, yes. I've got, in fact, I'll just show it to you here because I was hoping you were going to ask me that. But this one is, and maybe some of you have read it already, but it's called Innovation's Dirty Little Secret. Innovation's Dirty Little Secret. And it's actually written by a pastor, by the way.
Really?
Larry Osborne. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I wasn't sure when I was going to read it, but I couldn't get enough of it. It's
so good.
It's really great. And we were already doing some of the philosophies that they've learned within their church. And but he talks not just about church stuff. He goes into the secular world back and forth. It's really good. I highly recommend that book.
So good. Well, my friend, thank you so much. Everybody else, thanks for taking time today and joining us. So good. Next Thursday, we're going to send some information out, and we have Dr. Seung Chan Ra, who's joining us. In my opinion, he is probably the best person to speak on topics of race and intercultural ministry. Planted a church at Cambridge. He is a great guy as well. And man, it's so fun. I'm getting a chance to introduce people to my friends, and it's really cool. Tobie, that's the best, man. Thank you for taking time. Thanks to Nike for giving an hour of your day to us, and really appreciate it. And man, one final thing I'll say about Tobie, and I love this for all of us that sit around sometimes in ministry and we think, man, wouldn't it be great to just get a job at Nike? I think Tobie's a guy that Nike's every day saying, man, it'd be great if I was, just everybody understood what the ministry was really like, and that it's just ministry, and ministry's ministry no matter where you are. And I appreciate the pastor that you are on the campus and the way you care for people and lead over there. It's awesome, brother. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me. It's great seeing you. I wish I could hug all of you. Hopefully that'll happen someday. But God is doing a great thing. It's a revival. It's a digital revival, but it's a revival nonetheless. And we're seeing some good things. I hope you guys are as well. So it's amazing. So thanks for having me, Brad.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you.
All
See
right.
you soon.